Yo, 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 what is going on, RoK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. And today, I wanted to touch on the importance of understanding your starting province in Zone 1 and how the majority of kingdoms and alliances, if not all, in asterisk situations, which is typically the average and majority, are going about how they play Zone 1 in just arguably the worst ways possible that they can. And so we're going to talk about how when you are starting in a kingdom, how you can appropriately play out your Zone 1. And we're going to touch on some of the pros and cons about how you as an alliance or how you as a player might be seeing things playing out and how it can affect your Zone 1, not only going into Zone 2, but how it really can have ripple effects throughout the entire kingdom all the way through to Lost Temple. So before we get started, as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell, and of course, if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, hit up the Discord. You can find a link to that in the pinned comment description down below. Casual mode. Okay. The reason I thought this would be really good to talk about is because in one of the previous videos we touched on why it's important to try and establish some type of kingdom system, some type of council governing body early on, and we touched on how you can go about doing that early on from a day one. And so the expansion of that kind of goes then into, from one way, for how are you going to operate in your Zone 1s. And one of the most important things that comes to mind, and this is also going to be one of the first questions that I pose to you, and I want to hear what you guys have to say on this. Have you ever been a part of a kingdom? Whether it was an alliance you were running, it was an alliance you were a part of, maybe you were a part of a jumper group project, or again, maybe you just witnessed groups and projects coming in and doing this, where you have, out of your 6 Zone 1s here, you had, or 6 provinces in Zone 1, you started seeing that some alliances, some provinces, or maybe all, started to become one alliance provinces. And what I mean by that is you would have one alliance that just took the best of the best stuff, right? They would take all the unique altars, all the unique sanctums, and don't get me wrong, it's not as though there's a lot in that regard, because there are obviously some repetitive ones that you're going to have in each province, but they would go out and they would take the best of them, or they would take one of each unique, and then they would try and take as many of the Zone 1 passes, right? They would cut through territory, and they essentially were trying to turn the province into a one alliance province. This, I can tell you, is probably the worst thing that you can do. And I'm going to really explain why, which is that even if you were to do it as a one, and this is the extreme situation that we often see quite a few kingdoms that will turn into when you have this type of an unchecked, not checks and balances, but just unchecked kingdom where you don't really have anyone that is, fighting for the little guy, so to speak. So these are things that are important to pay attention to, because if you find yourself in a kingdom where you are noticing that one alliance per province is just looking to take the best of the best stuff, that is a big red flag. The reason why it is, and this is probably the most important reason, is because it directly will affect player drop-off early on. You have to understand that in Zone 1, your starting zone, that every single player that is in the kingdom is where they get populated into. No one's in Zone 2 yet. No one's made it to Zone 3 when a kingdom is just starting, when you're in the first week or two. So what that means is that once your new kingdom opens and you get that initial those initial player downloads, and anyone who wants to restart an account is going into your kingdom, Once the next kingdom comes out, now you're not getting as many people, if not almost anyone, that's going to be making accounts there, because now they're making accounts and downloads are being funneled to the next newest kingdom. So for all intents and purposes, your initial player funneling, or their creation of their accounts, has stopped. So you're left with what you have. At that point, that number is not increasing more than the amount of people that are leaving, stopping to play, or just general drop-off that you're seeing occur. So because of that, the priority really at that point becomes, how can I keep activity as high as we can, and therefore keeping player retention as high as we can. And so with that in mind, if you immediately start cutting off, and I'm not just talking about if it's a one alliance, maybe you're trying to run a two alliance province, right? And even sometimes a 3 alliance province, right? It just depends on how you go about operating there. But what you have to understand is that the more alliances that you either fight or you don't communicate with, you don't talk to, you don't do any diplomacy with, you don't have a game plan, you're just kind of playing it how you see fit, trust me when I say you are losing people up the bonanzas is what's happening, because nobody wants to play in a kingdom where they don't have an opportunity to go and build, where they don't have an opportunity to progress, where they don't have a chance to play the game, right? Maybe people really enjoy going out there and building flags, and they like seeing the fact that their territory is expanding. Maybe they like being able to go and siege a structure because participating in rallies is fun. And those are just some of the features that these individuals enjoy as a part of the game. So the moment you start denying them that, even though, yes, it is a war game, it's a strategy game, but there are pros and cons, actions and consequences. And so if you decide that your alliance is just going to take the best structures and then as many passes as you can, or you're going to take things away from others, just understand that that is going to factor into people not wanting to play in your kingdom and either migrating, switching alliances, stopping to play and restarting, or just uninstalling. And that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult for the majority of kingdoms where there is no kind of governing body that's set up early on, and or if there's no large enough jump group that's coming in to provide some type of a support/structured system. This is where it starts getting into that, where we're giving you the example of what happens when you're pretty much in an unorganized, unregulated kingdom that is that's just playing out a zone 1 and kind of this free-for-all status or state. So just be wary of that, and that's probably my biggest advice, is be careful on how many alliances or how many people you deny early on, because most likely those people are not going to be there throughout Zone 2, throughout Zone 3, and who knows, maybe some of those people could have been great fighters, maybe some of those people could have been spenders, but they just didn't like the way that things were looking early on, so they didn't want to invest anything else in the kingdom. There's so many ways to look at this, and I probably could do a couple of different videos explaining, but this is just more of a general high-level overview on why it's important. And we're also not saying that, you need to give every single alliance that's in the province, a certain amount of structures or a certain amount of passes, right? Or that you need to just split it up and you're going to have, 18 alliances, each get one structure, something like that. We're not saying that either. But there are ways to do it, and I'll give you one example. Just allowing for territory to be built. Allowing for people to go into additional zones, even if they're not going to build in those zones, or maybe they build along the perimeter or something of the sort. There are a lot of ways where you do not have to compromise really at all, or as much as some people think, and the benefit that you get from it can be so much greater than I think what the majority or what a good amount of people out there may know, right? And part of it is because again, RoK is kind of this, it's been institutionalized for a lot of players. If you watch other content creators or you have just played the game out your own way and you've heard from others on how you should think, on what you should believe, on this is possible, this is not possible, this is why we do it this way. And trust me when I say, when you watch my content, we're really about kind of breaking those borders down or those barriers down and really educating, explaining, giving you some supportive evidence and some references at times and when applicable. So you can see that, it doesn't always have to be done the way that you've been told or the way that you've been brought up or the way that you've learned or you've been mentored from someone else. You can really do things in a more efficient way by just having a different approach. And a lot of really what it comes down to is just understanding, right? For me, a lot of my knowledge and experience came from just playing in a lot of kingdoms and researching a lot of kingdoms. It was never me just feeling satisfied playing or only caring about my own kingdom, because that's how you tunnel vision, right? You're isolating yourself to where you're taking what you've learned in one kingdom and you're trying to have this kind of expanded application of that thought process on how your kingdom is set up and all its different areas that you are familiar with, and thinking or maybe assuming for some that those things are applied to all other kingdoms. And sure, maybe some of them could be. There's a lot of kingdoms out there. There's a lot of different ways of going about managing. So there's going to be some crossover, but it doesn't mean that everything is. And that's the important takeaway. So again, I hope this video helped when it comes to, if you're going into a new kingdom, why it's important to really understand why Zone 1 is by far the most important, because the way that Zone 1 plays out essentially sets the standard expectations for how the future zones will play out, and therefore pretty much the entire kingdom. So again, keep these things in mind, and then as you eventually end up getting there, these will be important things that I hope you're able to take away. And for those of you that really understand where I'm going with this, again, I hope you guys appreciate the thought and the process that's going in. And what I will lastly say is that if you've ever been a part of a situation that I'm explaining, please let me know in the comments down below. I always love hearing the stories and hearing how you have noticed these things, especially if it's a kingdom that you're currently playing in, or even if it's one that you played in previously. So that's it for me. As always, until next time, I'll catch you guys later. Say bye.
Bye.
Get it.